Hi folks, this is Ian's Movies by the Month, where I'm going to give you a rundown of the films I saw this month and what I thought about them. And as usual, it's not all going to be new films, and it definitely won't all be good films. So yeah, let's get cracking straight into February 2020, and let's kick off with the things that I've been watching at home, on Netflix, on Amazon, or Blu-ray or DVD. Now, the first film I watched in February was a wee oddity. It's something I found on Netflix. And the reason it's an oddity is because it's a film I actually started watching it early on in January, and then I ended up turning it off and watching the rest of it later. So I'm still classing this as a February film. And it's Act of Valor, a great big American action movie, the kind that we don't really see as much these days. It's the kind of film that's really in the vein of old movies like the Delta Force films.
America's elite anti-terrorist commandos. Their only mission, to neutralize the enemy.
If you ever saw any of those, or like the early Rambo sequels, where basically it's a story about a bunch of Navy SEAL type people who go in, they kill a bunch of baddies, usually terrorists, and they save people and do all that kind of good stuff. And this one, yeah, it's a story about a bunch of Navy SEALs, funnily enough, sent in to save a captured agent from some terrorists in the jungle. And then they've got to like head off the baddie terrorists as they try to secretly break into the USA from Mexico. And that might be a tiny bit of a summary, but it's actually basically the entire movie. And what sets this movie up as different is that all the operators in the movie are actually real life Navy SEALs. And you can tell because they're unbelievably proficient at all the things they do, all the sneaky run and gun stuff, they look absolutely top notch. And you can also tell because basically not a single one of them can actually act. I mean, no shame on these dudes, they do really good jobs and they clearly are really awesome at doing that kind of stuff, but none of them is really a budding Gary Oldman. And this isn't helped by the fact that the script's one of the most basic action movie trashy things I've ever seen, and the plot's as predictable as hell, and even down to like the really painfully obvious Spot the Stiff guy who keeps talking about how he can't wait to settle down and to spend time with his new baby and his girlfriend and stuff, and then the baddies being so completely over the top. It's totally 2 out of 5 at best. Essentially, there's two really good action sequences in this movie, and the entire rest of it is more or less a snooze fest that you'd be better off skipping. Or actually, you'd be better off just watching something like Black Hawk Down or Lone Survivor, or even the cheesy but fun 12 Strong. Yeah, but I wouldn't really go for Act of Valor. But Ian, I hear you say, do you only watch war movies? I mean, I know I watched loads of them last month. Well, no, I don't. I also like horror movies and dramas. And that's why I finally got around to watching a film made for Netflix. And it was a movie based on a Stephen King book called Gerald's Game. And it tells the story of Gerald and Jessie, who've gone away for a sexy long weekend together, another little sort of holiday luxury shoreside cabin, and they're hoping to rekindle the marital bliss. Only, as the title suggests, Gerald has a wee idea for a game, a sexy wee game involving a pair of handcuffs, and him being just a wee bit creepy. And she doesn't really like it, and in the argument that ends up following, he keels over of a heart attack and dies, leaving her trapped at the mercy of the elements, a random wild dog, starvation, her inner demons, and a recurrent nightmare about a shadowy figure who keeps appearing. And you think that I was giving away a lot here, but I'm actually not. I mean, this isn't a film so much about what happens, it's more about why did this happen and how is she going to deal with the situation. And it's almost entirely done as a single-hander. You've got Carla Gugino doing an amazing job of holding together an entire movie. She's got great support from Bruce Greenwood, and this being a Mike Flanagan movie, Mike Flanagan, he made Oculus, The Haunting of Hill House, and Doctor Sleep. Anyway, it's very much one of his projects, right down to the camera work, the colour palette, cinematography, and obviously he reuses actors he likes in his movies. And it's a pretty decent film. It's actually a lot better than the book as well. It does falter a little bit at the end, and there's some really absolutely horrific gory stuff in it, so you don't like that, maybe steer clear. But I really don't mind gore in films, so I thought, yeah, this is an absolutely solid 3 out of 5 movie. It's pretty good. It's a better kind of Stephen King movie. Not his top work, not his worst, but definitely enjoyable. And also, still, I do like older films, and I like less nasty films, which is why I watched Manon, which came out on swanky Blu-ray recently. And it's kind of bizarre when you consider that it's an old French film that was shot in 4:3 in the 1950s. But yeah, no, it definitely works. It sounds and looks pretty good for an old black and white square movie. And it's the story of a wee lassie called Manon, who's about to be arrested for collaborating with the Germans during the war. But her guard falls in love with her and they elope and go AWOL. And it goes pretty badly for both of them because she loves the high life and she loves money and presents, and every rich guy she meets wants to basically go to bed with her, and he's not entirely happy with that. But it's a really interesting film, and it's a depiction of like a tragic, toxic relationship. And I'm not going to spoil anything, but there are plenty of surprises, and it's a really bleak and lurid story, especially for the time. So, I mean, I'd give that definitely a 4 étoiles sur 5. Ah, oui, c'est l'amour. And continuing on with more slow-paced character films, I watched The Two Popes on Netflix. And this is one that's been getting all kinds of Oscar hype, and I can totally see why. You've got Jonathan Pryce being excellent in this film, playing the current Pope, and you've got an amazing backup work of Anthony Hopkins as the German Pope, the one who quit his job. And it's a surprisingly fascinating depiction of just two guys who are utterly opposed in lots of ways. And they totally disagree on loads of things, but they're both secure in their ideological and theological positions, and neither one of them goes without some moment of great regret in their lives. And I'll be honest, I knew just about nothing about either of these two people before watching this. I mean, I knew that the old German guy was in the Hitler Youth as a boy and he kind of looked like the Emperor from Star Wars. And I knew that he quit his job and the other guy ended up taking over. But to be honest, I thought the other guy was Irish. I didn't even realise he was Argentinian, so that shows you how much attention I've been paying. But still, this was a really fascinating film, and the actors were all amazing in it. And not only that, loads of it is actually filmed in the real Vatican around Rome, and there's a lot of stuff about how they choose the new popes, which is really fascinating stuff, because the only time I've ever seen that in anything else was back in that Borgia shows with Jeremy Irons that they made, which is also pretty entertaining. And it's a really fascinating, well put together film. And it doesn't sugarcoat things, but also it doesn't have a massive axe to grind, which I find lots of films that deal with religion or anything about the church generally do. They're generally made by people who are really angry at it or totally in love with it. But this one was just kind of even handed. And it's maybe a wee bit slow at times, but it's still definitely a very enjoyable, quiet Sunday afternoon movie. So again, a solid 3 out of 5. And the last of my home viewing movies in February was another Netflix movie. This time it was one that I was really surprised by. Uncut Gems. Now, I mean, I wasn't actually that bothered about seeing it because I'm really not an Adam Sandler fan, but I was at a pal's house and somebody put it on, and it was absolutely fantastic. And it tells the story of Adam Sandler's character, Howard, and he's a jeweler in New York, and he basically owes money to just about everybody because he gambles a lot, but he likes to pawn off things that he stores for collateral. And he's deep in hock to his brother-in-law, like crazy in hock to him, and he's got some heavies leaning on him to pay back because it's like 100 grand he's due, and he's got this uncut gem. And that's the big thing in the plot because he wants to flog it at auction. He reckons he's going to make like $1 million for it, and he ends up lending it to like a basketball player, but then he can't get it back, and then it all gets really convoluted, but never so much that you can't follow it. And that's like secret and gem of the movie is that the film's all about Howard chasing about robbing Peter to pay Paul and trying to get the stone back so he can take it to auction and he can pay his debts off, and he constantly keeps making infuriating decisions. And I think that's one of the things about this. I mean, if it puts you off the idea that Adam Sandler's in it, he's absolutely perfect because he plays this character who absolutely drives you nuts and you really want to slap him about, and it's perfectly done because that is the character. He's infuriating, he's annoying, he does stupid things, but you kind of end up grudgingly liking him anyway in a sort of way. I mean, you wouldn't want to spend time around him, but he's completely watchable and he's 100% consistent and believable in that character role. And I have very little time for Sandler, as I said, but he was amazing in this. So yeah, a film that really lives up to the hype. Absolutely, 5 out of 5, well worth your time, effort and investment. Since back in February there were still cinemas open, I actually got the house and saw a few things. And it was definitely a month for ladies' movies. I mean, kind of. Not really, but actually, yes. And the first one I saw was Little Women. Yep, the new adaptation of the classic American novel about the family of sisters and their mum, whose dad's away fighting in the Civil War, and who they fall in love with and what they get up to. And I've got to be honest, I absolutely got into this wee movie. I mean, I know that Little Women is a classic, and a lot of my audience is from America and Canada, and a lot of you guys really, really love stuff like this, and you probably grew up reading it at school. But I'll share a secret. I have never read this book. Not only that, I've only seen one version of it once, and that was the Winona Ryder version, and I'm not even sure I actually watched the whole movie. So it was kind of a surprise to me how much I enjoyed this. This is an absolutely fantastic movie, and it's not really surprising considering how amazing the cast is. I mean, you know that I highly rate Saoirse Ronan because I'm a massive fan of Atonement and she's brilliant in that.
Yes. I saw him. I saw him with my own eyes.
But also she absolutely shines in this. And you've also got Florence Pugh, who's frankly just brilliant in literally everything. I mean, she's been in so many films over the last few years, and she's just a total growing talent and is becoming one of my favourite actresses. But the work she does in this shows the difference between herself as a young lass at the beginning of the film and as the same little woman later on the cusp of adulthood is just impressive as hell. And on top of that, you've got a commendable turn by Hermione herself, Emma Watson, who I'm a little less enamoured with as a performer. But then there was also a more surprising turn by relative newcomer Eliza Scanlon, and there was great support from Laura Dern and that Timothée Chalamet guy. No, really, I mean, I've seen him in this, and I heard he's going to be in the new Dune movie. Other than that, I don't really know much about him. I hear he's a big noise. But anyway, I like the movie a lot. Like I said, it's really funny, it's smart, it's clever, it's got really good performances. But I liked it, I didn't love it. And a lot of folk kept arguing that Greta Gerwig should have gotten an Oscar nod for directing this. And, I found that the direction of the film there was a bit of a messiness to some of the ways it cut back and forward in time and some of the ways that it was done that felt like it assumed too much knowledge of the material, which I didn't have, obviously. But as I said, I thought it was really well written, so yeah, she deserved an Oscar nomination for that. So while I enjoyed it, and I'll give it an easy 4 out of 5, I would say definitely check it out. It's probably going to be like a family Christmas special for an awful lot of people. But the next film I saw was definitely a chick flick. No, absolutely. Because what else could you possibly call it? It was Harley's emancipation of her fabulous birds of Quinn praise, or something. I mean, actually, I'm joking aside, they have actually changed the name of this film once while I'm still at the pictures, because at first it was The Birds of Prey and the Emancipation of One Harley Quinn, Fantabulous or something, and then they changed it to Harley Quinn Birds of Prey, because apparently it wasn't doing it well enough. But anyway, if somehow you didn't hear about any of this, Harley, as I'll call it, is the spin-off movie from the DC Comics series that kicked off with like Man of Steel, Wonder Woman, all that kind of thing. And there was a spin-off called Suicide Squad, and it was all about bad guys getting hired in like a Dirty Dozen team. And it was a terrible, terrible film. Don't bother. Don't waste your time. Anyway, you don't need to because they're rebooting it next year with the guy who made Guardians of the Galaxy. But the point is, one of the characters in it was Harley Quinn, who's like the Joker's girlfriend. And in this film, they've broken up, and it's really all about how this Ms. Quinn, now Son's gangster boyfriend, becomes the target of every baddie in town because of her bad behaviour over the years. And it ends up in this weird hunt for a special diamond that this kid has. And there's a whole load of other female, not hero types who have to fight a load of man bads. And the man bads are mostly led by Obi-Wan Kenobi himself, playing Black Mask. And he's like a creepy gangster who owns a club. And he likes to cut people's faces off. And there's kind of a plot, but there's not a huge amount. It's a bit of an all over the place kind of movie, and it's sort of fun. I mean, it's not great. It's kind of fun to watch Margot Robbie being Harley Quinn, and there's a lot of like silly things. And it's really just a rehash of concepts from other movies like Deadpool that did this stuff a lot funnier and a lot better, but it's not terrible. So I'll be generous and give it a 3 out of 5. It's watchable, but completely forgettable. So yeah, low end 3 out of 5. And what wasn't either of these things was the next film I saw, which, despite a trailer that started out looking like an advert for some kind of insurance company or something.
Miss Woodhouse! You will never guess what has happened. Robert Martin has offered me his hand.
No, really. I mean, it actually was a really good film. It's a classic retelling of the Jane Austen book, Emma, which is all about the rich daughter of this widowed noble guy, and she spends her time trying to pair up people she knows while being oblivious to like all the attractive attentions of other people, despite her being, obviously very wealthy and very pretty. And if you've never read the book or seen any other adaptation of the story, you're probably familiar with the film Clueless, which took the same story and made it into like a mid-90s modernized version of it. And I mean, that's a classic, and I presume people have actually seen it. But this version of it has got Anya Taylor-Joy from The Witch, and Mia Goth, who's in The Cure to Wellness, and even Johnny Flynn, who's like a modern folk musician guy who's recently starred in that Netflix show Lovesick, and then everybody's favourite squid pirate actor Bill Nighy. And it's the directorial debut of Autumn de Wilde, who's better known for doing music videos and photography, but she seems to be pretty damn good at the filmmaking lark. It's a beautifully put together film that takes a story with a lot of slow moments, and it makes it never less than intriguing, while making things like who's going to ask who to dance at a party into a really compelling plot point. And if there's a flaw with it, it's that the character of Emma is a little bit cold, which is kind of the point. Or the story doesn't ever really quite get into her and her thoughts and feelings quite enough to get away from the fact that she's kind of unlikable and comes across as a little bit vapid. And the fact is, if she wasn't quite as rich and pretty as she was, nobody would actually have any time or put up with her nonsense at all. But still, I mean, Anya Taylor-Joy really plays into it well, and she's really good. And it's kind of a problem that's inherent to the book. So yeah, 4 out of 5. Check it out. I really enjoyed it. It's really well worth seeing. And the last film I saw was a very different kind of movie, Greed. And it's all about a high street shop tycoon called Richard McCready, and he's frankly a horrible, greedy, wealthy guy planning to celebrate his 60th birthday on a Greek island. And it tells the story in part through the device of David Mitchell, who plays his biographer. And he's trying to write all this up. But in the process, we get glimpses of how he treats his workers, his staff, and his family, and also paralleling this with like the refugees camping on the beach behind his resort, and the people who work in his factories. And Greed's a really curious movie. I mean, it's a movie by Michael Winterbottom, and he's a guy who made Welcome to Sarajevo and 24-Hour Party People, and it stars Steve Coogan, who UK folk know mostly from the show Alan Partridge, where he plays an over-the-top TV show host, and Isla Fisher from Wedding Crashers, who's his ex-wife. And the cast is full of like famous people, a lot of them playing themselves as well as playing some really interesting characters. And just like any Winterbottom film, it's got a really strong moral message to make, and it's generally very well put together, and it's kind of funny. I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed it a lot, and I think it makes some very important points about wealth disparity. But it's a shame that it does so at times at the expense of making the story as interesting and as engaging as it could have been. But I'll give it a solid 3 out of 5. So yeah, it's funny, it's educational, and it's entertaining, but it's probably not for everyone. And yeah, so that was February, a month where most of the stuff I watched was pretty good, and I really enjoyed most of it. And 2020, at least this far, is shaping up for a cinematically a fantastic year. And I'll be back with March movies really soon. And in the meantime, remember, you can follow me on Twitter at Grumpy Opinions and chat to me there or join the Facebook group. And if you're feeling really generous, you can always sign up to my Patreon and chuck me a wee bit of spare cash. And until then, I've been Ian, and these have been my Grumpy Opinions. And a final thanks yet again to my wonderful Patreons and especially Michelle Forbes for being a top tier pal. Thanks guys, take care.